All right, welcome to the Hall of Fame Fatherhood Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Mistovich. Today, I'm joined by Donovan Jones. Donovan's a husband, father of four, and the host of the Call to Act podcast. Donovan, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, Steve, how you doing? I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come on and speak with you for a little bit. I've been excited about this.
Yeah, me too. Looking forward to a good conversation.
Absolutely.
Looking through your posts, I'm not typically a TV watcher,
Yeah.
but right before Christmas, I dove into the Chosen series. I've seen
Okay.
you posted, some things about that on Instagram, and just wanted to
Yeah.
get your take. Like, what have you learned, or what's a favorite episode that you've?
Oh man. I going back to well, first of all, I love what you're doing. I love your page. I love the things that you're trying to push in terms of fatherhood, and to take that into the Chosen. I think for me, my favorite episode is season 1, episode 3, where I think it's episode 3 where Jesus is with the children. That one just hits for me differently because anytime I see something with kids are involved, it always takes me back to, the relationship with me and my kids. So, I think that one's my favorite, but they're all so very good. And I really got into that show probably in, I guess, late 2020. And that was really a time for me where I wasn't always, if you follow me on Instagram or if you see the post, generally the stuff that I post is Christian content. And I wasn't always kind of walking that way, but through circumstances and through several things that happened in my life, The Chosen was one of those things that got me back into scripture, got me back into reading the Bible, because it brought the Bible to life for me, because a lot of times you read the Bible and you're like, God, like it's hard to get through one chapter. Like, this is boring, I'm just being real.
Yeah.
And so for me, as I started watching The Chosen, and then I go back and read what I just watched, and I read the name Peter, or I read the name James or John or whoever, I'm like, okay, now I see who this is actually talking about. And it just brought scripture to life for me. So I really love what they're doing. And I know that they're trying to do 7 seasons, and it's something that is completely crowdfunded. So I'm just hoping and praying that they'll be able to get the funds to, first of all, just get through all the seasons, but then also keep the crew that they have on there. Cause I know they've already had to change a couple actors already just in their first couple seasons. So hopefully they'll be able to get the funds to keep it going.
Yeah, I mean, I'm typically not a binge watcher, but I binged that show, and I got, a new one just came out on Sunday. I got to watch that one yet, but
yeah,
I just
haven't
found
watched it
it
yet.
very interesting that, like, I was so intrigued and like caught up in the show. Like, I seen you posted about it, so I just want to get your take on that.
I love what they're doing too, because a lot of times when Christian content is put out, it's either cheesy or it's low budget, or it's just boring. They have Jesus as this character that seems so distant from us, like we would never be able to feel like we could have a relationship with that person. But what The Chosen does so well is it highlights that human aspect of Jesus, because if you look in the Bible, people were constantly flocking to Jesus, and so he had to have some kind of like charisma to him to where people would want to come around him. So I think they do a good job of like highlighting that to make it seem like, okay, this is actually somebody that I would want to have a relationship with, that I would want to, go to dinner with or hang out with the boys or whatever like that. You know what I mean? So I just love that they're pushing that, and not this Jesus who is so much higher above you, talking down to you, judging you, you know what I mean? So
the divine, the one that we can't touch and all that. Yeah, I agree. I can't say I've watched many like Christian movies.
They're hard to watch.
Yeah, they are hard to watch, but this one it has none of the cheesiness. And it's really well done. I was really surprised.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'd switch gears a little bit. So just give me a little bit about your background, what got you into Christian content and the Call to Act podcast.
Well, honestly, like I said, I wasn't always kind of walking. I became a Christian when I was a young boy. I was raised in a Christian home, but I think, it's good to be raised in a Christian home, but at the same time, there's kind of a crutch there, because it gets to the point in your life where you're saying, do I believe what I believe just because I was raised this way, just because my parents believe this way, or is this legit? And so for me, as I got older, going through high school, I didn't always walk the way that I should have walked, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I didn't always prioritize the things that I needed to prioritize. And so really, in 2020 was when I kind of came back that way and started trying to take my faith a little bit more seriously. And through that, I was like praying, reading my Bible more, and watching The Chosen. And I just felt like the Lord was calling me to do more for him. And so I created a men's Bible study, and that went well for a little bit. And I just felt like the Lord was calling me to do more. And I was never someone who put any kind of content out. Like if you looked at my personal Instagram page, I got like 100 followers. The only post that I ever post was like just of my kids dancing around or whatever. Yeah. I was never someone who made videos or made any kind of content. And so I just felt like the Lord was calling me to do more. And so in like praying and seeking after him, I told my wife, I said, I think what I need to do is I need to make an Instagram page where I'm not going to put my face on there. I'm not going to put my name, but I'll just put like a Bible verse up every day, or like little words of encouragement or like inspiration, just to kind of like inspire people and encourage people. And so I was like, I'm just going to do that. And so I went to go do that. And for whatever reason, Instagram wouldn't let me make the page. Like I kept getting to the final page and it kept saying like error or whatever. And I'm not a super tech savvy dude. So like I asked my wife, I'm like, can you look at this and try to help me out? And so she got on there. She's like, I don't know what the deal is. This is weird. And I was like, okay. So I waited a couple of days. I was like, well, maybe some kind of tower's down or something. Who knows? And so I tried it a couple of days later and it wouldn't go through. And I was like praying and I said, Lord, like, what's the deal? Like, I'm trying to do this for you, trying to make a page to like encourage people. Why are you blocking me from doing this? And at that time, I drive a truck for a living. And so at that time, I was listening to a lot of podcasts, and I was listening to a podcast from this professor from Lipscomb University. And he was always talking about Anchor, where you can make a free tools to create your own podcast. Mm-hmm. And I just felt something inside me tell me that I needed to create one. And I was like, that's not for me. Like, I'm not somebody that gets behind a microphone. I'm not somebody who makes any kind of videos or content or anything like that. And so I was just kind of going for a couple weeks listening to that podcast. And then I just kept feeling that burning, like, this is what I want you to do. And at that time in my walk, I was trying to find out as much as I could about Jesus, because Jesus is so, the representation of Jesus is presented very poorly in a lot of churches and by a lot of Christians. So I was like trying to legitimately find out like if Jesus was legit or not, you know what I'm saying? Like I was searching. Mm-hmm. And so in that, I just felt like the Lord was putting in my heart, like quit complaining and quit looking for something that you can do yourself. And so I was like, okay. And so then I was at work one morning, and then my sister texted me and she's like, hey, and I didn't tell my wife, I had not talked to anybody about feeling in the back of my mind like I need to start a podcast. My sister texted me out of the blue one morning. She's like, hey, I think you need to start a podcast. And I was like, that's weird. So I was like, okay, Lord, like if this is what you're calling me to do. And at that time I was reading in the book of Acts, Acts chapter 4, verse 13. It talks about Peter and John were in the synagogue preaching. And I didn't go to school. I'm not a pastor. I don't do anything in my church. I go to my church, but I don't help out. I don't teach a class or anything like that. You're not a
theology student.
No, nothing like that. And that was one of the things that kind of held me back, because I was like, nobody's going to want to listen to a truck driver that has no idea what he's talking about. Mm. And so at that time I was reading the book of Acts, where it says that the people could tell by the way that Peter and John spoke that they were common, uneducated men, but they spoke with boldness because they had been with Jesus. The people could tell that they had been with Jesus because the way that they spoke, and they spoke with, that boldness. And so I was like, okay, Lord, like if this is what you're calling me to do, like give me the strength, give me the boldness to do it. And so we just rocked it out from there. We started the podcast that weekend, and it's been just that was in February. So we're coming up on a year in a month. So it's been awesome.
Awesome. What about the representation of Jesus that you're like, what was wrong with the way he's presented?
I think just the judgmental side of it. I think a lot of people feel like they can't come to Jesus because they feel like he's just going to judge you, or he's going to cast you aside, say you're not good enough, or he's going to throw a bunch of rules at you. I can't follow Jesus because I have to follow these unreasonable guidelines for my life. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of that, especially in churches. Like for me, I have tattoos, And if I tried to go back to the church that I grew up in, they wouldn't accept me in there because I have tattoos. And I look at that, and then I look at Jesus, and for somebody that is not a believer, and they try to go into that church that I grew up in, and they have tattoos, and somebody tells them that they are not welcome there because they have tattoos. Like if I was somebody that wasn't a Christian, then I would be like, okay, so why would I want to have anything to do with Jesus if these are supposedly his people that are saying that they follow him, but they're telling me I'm not welcome here, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think there is and I'm not trying to just bash the church, because there's a lot of churches that are doing the right thing, and there's a lot of churches that are, accepting people the way that they should, but there is a lot of judgmental people inside the church. And just for instance, like my mom, growing up, we didn't have a whole lot of money, and my mom worked for a place here in Chattanooga called Orange Grove Center. And basically it's a place for mentally challenged people, mentally handicapped, that can't take care of themselves. So they live in these group homes. And so my mom worked in there. She did that for like 15, 17 years. And we took all those kids with us to church here in the Chattanooga area. And one of the girls, they're in their mind, some of them are a year old, even though they're 20 or 30. You know what I'm saying? Like they're just not there. Mm-hmm. And this one woman, whenever they would start singing, she would clap and stuff, and she was getting all excited. And then when it came time for the pastor to start preaching or whatever, she was still kind of making some noises. And one of their ushers came up and told us, hey, y'all need to leave. Y'all are making too much noise. And we're like, well, first of all, you could see that she's not, like she's handicapped. Like y'all could visibly see that she's sitting in a wheelchair. You know what I'm saying? And so for me, seeing that kind of stuff, I can see why the world would say, I don't want to have anything to do with Jesus, because the way Christians, not all Christians, but a lot of Christians present him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I it's just interesting because, like, I mean, I grew up Catholic, mm-hmm. and, much like you were saying, didn't walk a straight path, and
sure.
fell away from the faith and did what most Catholics do. Yeah. And now, and had much of the same questions of like, how could he be so harsh of a judger? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's like, now I'm at the point where, like, so I wanted this soft, like, feminine type Jesus. Mm-hmm. And now I'm at the point where it's like, okay, not that I want the mercy, like I think that's good, but also, like, how do you balance that with the judger? Because I mean, he's both judgment and mercy. So it's like trying to strike that balance of what Christ is or God is. Like, how do you strike that balance in your head?
To me, I just think about it like, because we're all human beings, like we all make mistakes every day. And for me, I think the Bible, the more that I get into it and the more that I read it and the more that I actually try to get something out of reading it, not just trying to say I read a chapter every day, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm actually reading it with the intent of trying to get something out of it. It reveals more to itself. You hear people say, the Bible's living and it's alive. And to me, that means that, like, each and every time you read it, if you're going at it with that attitude, like I'm trying to get something out of it at this point, and you pray beforehand and be like, Lord, reveal something fresh to me in this moment. Like he's going to do that because he wants that relationship with us. He wants that relationship aspect with us, because if you look at the disciples, when they went to Jesus and asked him, teach us how to pray, I think it's very interesting because they didn't go to him and say, teach us how to do miracles. They didn't say, can you teach us how to preach? Can you teach us how to, they asked, can you teach us how to pray? And his response was, our Father. And so to me, that relationship aspect, for him to start out with, he's not saying, oh, great and mighty God. He's saying for us to pray like our Father, right? And so I think the thing about it that is oftentimes missed too is if you look in the book of Proverbs, I think it's Proverbs 20, chapter 24, it talks about how a righteous man falleth 7 times but gets back up again. And so Jesus says in the word, like, be perfect as I am perfect. I think that's in Matthew. And he knows that we're never going to be perfect, because like it says in Proverbs, a righteous man falleth 7 times. So just kind of understanding in our mind, like it's never going to be perfect. But when Jesus said, be perfect as I'm perfect, he's saying like, strive for it, like strive for perfection. Even if all you can do in that moment is just crawl, trying to get, you know what I'm saying? Trying to get better in your life, trying to be a better person, trying to be a better Christian or whatever the case may be, a better father. It's just not staying still, not going backwards, even if all you can do is crawl at that point until the point where you can get up and start walking again. It's just trying to keep striving forward, keep pushing forward, and understanding too, if you look in Psalm 23, it talks about, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And in that passage, it talks about how he has a rod. It says the rod, the staff, he comforts me. And so if you look at a shepherd literally provides everything for the sheep. Like the sheep cannot do anything without the shepherd. And so when you look at the shepherd, he's got the rod in one hand, and that's like God for us. Like he's got the rod to protect us. But then in the other hand, like he has grace and mercy for us. So there is times that we can get out of that. Like we can do something wrong, but we can never get too far away to where he's going to just say, I'm done with you. Because if that was the case, then the price that he paid for us on the cross wasn't good enough. Right. And if you look throughout scripture, there's time and time again where it says something along the lines of, before the foundations of the earth were laid, X, Y, and Z had already happened. So if I have a plan of something that's going to happen 10 years down the road, and I know every single thing that's going to happen for 10 years, and I'm still going to do what I had planned to do at the end of that 10 years that I said at the beginning of that 10 years, like that's how it is for Jesus. Like him and the Father, this was the plan all along. So like every single thing that I do in my life, if I lived for 50 years and 41 of my years, I was living the wrong way, living, even if I knew the right way, and I was just living the wrong way the whole time. And in the last 9 years of my life, I lived for him. He already knew that I was going to do that. And he already took those 41 years that I disrespected him, that I lived the way that I shouldn't lived, and he died for me on the cross. You know what I'm saying? So it's just understanding that, yes, he is perfect and he is the ultimate judge, but he's not like this judgmental being that is just waiting to strike us down. Like he loves us. Like it talks time and time again in the word about how, like I said, like he's our heavenly Father. And so he just has so much love for us. And I think that's another thing when I was saying earlier about like the misrepresentation of Jesus, I think that's a part of it too, that a lot of people don't get, is like, he really does love and care for us. It's not just a children's song, Jesus loves me, this I know. It's like legit, it's real stuff. And the way that it's presented, oftentimes it makes it seem like it's too far fetched, or it's something that we can never attain. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I like that you brought up a father's love. I think that's a good transition point to talk about fatherhood. And you're a father of 4.
Yeah.
What do you see as the biggest challenges that you faced as a father? And you can even expand on that as a general whole.
Well, first of all, I think right now in society, like manhood and fatherhood is really under attack like never before. In terms of like just the downplaying of the role of the father. If you look at different TV shows or movies or whatever, the dad's always kind of like this blundering idiot, right? Like he has no idea what's going on. He's always this moron. Yeah. And so right off the bat, your kid kind of looks at you like you're a joke, because they're looking, okay, this is how the dad is presented on TV, so this must be how the dad is in real life, And so I think the thing that's the hardest, I think, right now for most fathers is like the content that's being put out, because there's so much and it's so in your face all the time, because not only is it TV, but now there's phones and there's iPads and there's, when you're in the grocery store and your kid starts screaming, you just hand them the phone. You know what I'm saying? And I'm guilty of that. Like we've done that before. And I think, especially with like the pricing of everything going up, how it is, inflation, there's not a whole lot of people that can survive just off of a husband's income. So the mother's having to go out and work. And so then you're having to put your kids really at the mercy of whoever is their teacher in preschool or whatever. And then they're just taking in whatever they're shoving out to them in these schools.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said about churches, not every school is bad, but there's a lot of schools that are teaching kids things right now that they should not be teaching them, that are things that the parents should decide when they should be learning. And so I think when you put all that together, and the kids seeing you on TV, and maybe you're working so much you don't see your kids a whole lot. And so then the times that you see them, you're so exhausted from working so much. It's like, go watch TV, let me just sit here and relax for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you kind of put all those things together, and it really just kind of puts on your plate, like, you've got to be intentional. Like, you've got to be like consistently trying to be that voice in your kid's life, because they're going to hear stuff from every other, what I'm saying, all around them. But it's just like, what, when they think of their dad, like, what is that voice in their head going to be saying,
Right. Yeah. It's, like, even thinking about like the classic movies that, like, the Home Alones, that, everybody grew up on it and it's still watched. I got a 6-year-old, and that's a new family tradition to watch Home Alone around Christmas time. It's like, there wasn't, very exaggerated, but even still, it wasn't, the dad wasn't.
He's never intellectual.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like,
right.
Thinking about those and seeing it more and more, it's like, it is a struggle. Just TV and technology are so integrated into our lives. Like, when it's not, movie night, it's like, all right, well, what do we do? And it's like, that's where, you got to kind of go against the grain of even just your own thought process and get out of your comfort zone and be like, okay, you know what? Let's not watch a movie, and let's go, play chess or go outside. And it's definitely tough because the draw of the technology is there. Like, it's very, very hard
and
to pull yourself away.
It's so easy to get into too, especially if you're somebody like me or you, were trying to like create stuff to like content to put out. And so you could kind of get lost in that place too of, being on social media too much. And one thing that I'm really trying to make a goal for this year is trying to stay off of it more, because I don't want my kids to think that, like, when they look back at their dad, they're like, yeah, he worked all the time, and then when he got home, he just sat on the couch on his phone, And you said something that I thought was really good in one of your past podcasts, where you talked about how, like, whenever you try to tell your kid to do something, maybe, and I'm going to butcher the way you said it, but it was something along the lines of like, how could you expect your kid to listen to you about you asking them to go do something or telling them to go do something, if when they come to you and ask you something, you're saying, hold on a second, or, you're kind of pushing them off to the side, because you're like setting that example right before them, like, okay, this is how dad acts, so this must be how I'm supposed to act, right? And so I think that was so good, because, and that to me, I was like, man, that I never thought about it that way. But it's so true. It's like, the way that we live our lives, they're looking at us, and how we live our lives. Ultimately, that's how they're going to model it, especially us as men. That's just how we were hardwired. You see so many people right now. If you just look at the statistics and the numbers of people that grew up with just a single mother, and no bashing single mothers at all, because, I grew up my parents got divorced when I was in 7th grade. And so from 7th grade on, my mom was the only, my dad was out of the picture, and so, not bashing the single mothers at all. But if you look at the numbers of kids that grew up in 2-parent household versus single mother household, it's a completely different story. Even if dad is a deadbeat, like, even if dad is there, if he's just there, there's a difference. You know what I'm saying? The grades are different. Their mindset is different. Their confidence is different, because there's something different when you're a little kid and you're trying to, like, if you're a little girl and you're doing ballet, what is the first thing they say? Look, dad, look at this. There's mom is very important, but in the back of their mind, they want dad to see what they've done. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I'm sure that you experienced it, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier about the father's love. Like, you know, even if you take, I'm going to butcher this, but one of my authors that I've read and listened to quite a bit is Father Richard Rohr.
Mm-hmm.
And he said something to the effect like, even if you don't believe Jesus is Christ and, or that God is a man, like
Mm-hmm.
if you look at like how, fathers interact in the positive sense, like you can understand how the ancients got to the conclusion that God was a man, was a father. It wasn't just some arbitrary like, oh, because he's a man, or men are better, so God must be a man. Like it wasn't that simple minded. Like there's a lot of thought. And that's one thing that I found in my journey, like the depth of the Bible, like I haven't even scratched the surface. So, but like I understand, and I've humbled myself to recognize like there's a lot of depth here that I can spend the second half of my life going through, and I may not get halfway down. So it's just the importance and the feeling of like, at times I can just pour out love, like on my kids, like it feels like forever, because it's hard to describe what I'm doing a poor job of describing what I'm trying to get across, but it just feels like an infinite well that I can draw upon for them.
Yeah.
And of course, they're little assholes and they piss you off, and
right.
But it's like, it's hard to describe the feeling that you feel as a father.
Yeah. And, it's, I think, I think a lot of people who don't have kids, it's harder for them to understand when you talk about a relationship of like God the Father and us, because there is that love that you can only experience in this life, like with a kid, like having your own child. Like you can't experience that love anywhere else. I mean, I'm 28 years old. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I know that I love my wife. And the second that we had, our first kid, I'm like, this is a whole different kind of love. You know what I'm saying? And it's just the love and the feeling that you have towards them. You're like, I can't even. It's hard to explain. It's hard to express. But especially like if you have, we just had, and the older I get, like I said, I'm 28, and our oldest daughter, she's 8 years old. So we've had kids since we were 20. And I know you had your first when you were 18, right? So you were even younger. But it's just, and so I'm sure you could speak to this too. Like the younger you are, it's almost like you don't understand it, obviously just because you're so young. But then the older you get, I noticed that the more kids that we had, it becomes more precious and it becomes more special each time. Not that any of them are more special than the other, but just in my mind, I'm like, wow, this is crazy, like this is insane. And then the love, like our youngest, she's 3 months old. And I remember as soon as she was born, like I teared up a little bit for our middle two, a little bit. But then when we had her, we knew it was going to be our last. And I remember I was just holding her and I was thinking like, I just met this human being and I love her more than anything. And like, I can't let anybody do anything to her. You know what I'm saying? Like I have to protect her with my life if it comes to that. And it just puts like a deeper love and a deeper appreciation. And to me, it took me back to scripture, because like for me, and I don't want like your listeners to be like, this dude's just like a Bible thumper or whatever, but it's just like, I've just really taken my walk more seriously. And it just took me back to like that father's love, because I was thinking like, okay, I know how much I love this little girl right here. And my love is flawed because I'm a sinner, because I'm fallen. My love is flawed. So how much more perfect is his love for me? That is perfection. That's no sin in it. There's nothing wrong with his love. You know what I'm saying? Like how much more does he love me than I love this child that I'm holding right now? And it just took me to a place with like, I have got to do the best job that I can to like teach my kids the proper way, to like teach my kids, right from wrong, to make sure, because I think a lot of times what I was doing was I would just kind of say, well, they'll see how we live and they'll just kind of emulate it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, wait a second. If half the time I'm mad because some dude cut me off and I'm cussing the dude out, or if I'm flipping somebody off or whatever, like, how am I actually setting a good example? Because they see and hear and copy everything that we do. So it like just put it on my mind, like, okay, I've got to like make sure that I'm being intentional. And that's like my word for the year, like my New Year's resolution word, like intentionality, just trying to be more intentional in all aspects of life, because I think we can miss moments in our life so easily, moments that we should have like taken more advantage of. And they could just pass you right by because you're pissed off because Dunkin' Donuts didn't have the right donut that you wanted, or the flavor of coffee you wanted. And you can let that affect half of your day, and you miss out on something that could have been, like a memorable moment in your life, or something that, could have been an encouragement to somebody else or you, or, I mean, you don't know. And so it's just like not letting some of this petty stuff take control of your whole day,
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, now, you said that you and your wife aren't having any more kids. It's almost like at the same moment that your youngest is born, like it's also an end, because there's no more, trying to get pregnant. There's no, that phase is done. So it's like, and I never really thought of that. Like back in late summer, my wife had a miscarriage, and being 41,
sorry,
it's like, I'm not waiting forever. So it's like, it's one step closer to, it maybe being the last time. So it's like, when you look at it from that perspective, I mean, when I was a young father, talk about just not really caring and not really understanding how much he would emulate. Like,
yeah, dude.
I look at, he's soon to be 23.
Yeah.
And it, like, just in the way he looks at money and the way he looks at his girlfriend and how he treats her, like, not that it's a bad thing, but it's very much new age, like, oh, we're going to live together first, instead of just making the jump to, getting married and starting a family and just making the commitment, much like I did. He followed in my footsteps, or is following in my footsteps in that regard. Yeah. It's like, oh, I can't, not that there's blame to be tossed around, but like, that's a clear example to me. Like, I set that example and he followed, so it's, no matter what the actions are, no matter how big or small, they're going to follow your actions and not your words.
Yeah. That's so true. And even the little things, like talking about being in traffic. Like I remember last year, my son was 3, and we do this thing every Saturday, where me and him will get up and we'll go to Bojangles and get us all biscuits, and bring them back. And so every Saturday he's waking me up at, 4:00 in the morning. Can we go get biscuits now? And I'm like, dude, let me sleep till at least sunrise, and so, we went and got biscuits one morning. He was 3, and he 3-year-old can't talk super well, but he could talk. And, we were driving and some dude cut me off, and I said, look at this jerk, and, like a week or 2 later, somebody had cut in front of us, and I didn't say anything because my wife was in the car. We don't say as much when the women are in the car. You know what I'm saying? So somebody had cut us off, and I just kind of looked at her, and then we hear from the back, look at this jerk. And I was like, it kind of put in my mind, like, okay, I've got to really watch what I do and say, because this dude's looking at me. And then, like, since I started this podcast too, there's so many times where I'll go to my like my phone, or if I go to my laptop and open it up, like he'll have gotten on there, he'll have stuck it to my room and he's talking about his podcast. You know what I'm saying? So it's like
Yeah.
they're looking at what you're doing in your life because they're trying to figure out like, how am I supposed to go about life? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like there's really a big responsibility on us to actually like show them the way and not lead them astray.
Yeah, it's I don't know the Bible verse, but essentially, bring them up in the way, and they will
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
It's like I find that to be more true than ever. It's like it's
Yeah.
definitely true.
Yeah.
So,
But I mean, even with that too, you need to give yourself grace as well, because especially if you're trying to do the best that you can as a parent. The Bible does say that, like, to raise your kids up, but it also says like they won't depart from it. So like if you truly are raising them the right way, and then they grow up and then they decide this isn't the way that I want to live, like ultimately that's where like free will comes into play, because like
right.
um I heard it said like this, like if like God tells us we have free will, so like for us as a parent, if we tell our kid we have free will and we go to the mall, take them to the mall and we tell them, hey, sit right here at this table, I'm going to go get us some pizza over here and then I'm going to bring it back. And then you say, I trust you to sit here by yourself and not get up, but then you take handcuffs and handcuff them to the chair, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not free will. That's saying you're telling them, I trust you not to get up, but then you're ensuring that they don't get up. So it's just kind of that understanding that we're not handcuffing them. You're trying to raise them up the right way, but then ultimately it is their choice how they want to live. And
Mm-hmm.
like, if you are raising them according to the Bible, or just trying to, I look at it from a Christian standpoint, just because I as a Christian, I can't look at it any other way. But like from a worldly standpoint, if you're just looking at it from, I'm just trying to raise them to be decent human beings, like you just have to trust that you did the best job that you could, and then let them go. And then ultimately it's up to them how they want to live after that.
Right. Yeah. I mean that it's definitely going through some things. During my oldest's teenage years, you know he was old enough to know right from wrong, and
Mm-hmm.
you have to be willing to allow them to fall also, and
Yeah.
we've gone through that, and he's learned some lessons, and I couldn't be prouder of the man that he is, at 23 years old. So
Yeah. That's awesome.
It's the way I came into fatherhood, you know, things got blown up very quickly, and I kind of lost my way.
Mm-hmm.
But looking back, like I can see, like I was made to be a father. Like it's something that gives me purpose. It's definitely something that prevented me from going down some dark paths, in my younger years. So it, and now it's just a fuel to, work to get better, and be a better human and a better example.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so that's my soapbox
Yeah.
for a minute. What would you say is the greatest lesson like you've learned from your father?
Me and my dad have a great relationship right now. It wasn't always that way. From the time that him and my mom split up, like I said, when I was in seventh grade, he wasn't there for years, and he remarried and moved, several hours away, and we didn't see him a whole lot. And so I would say by him not being there, I feel like the greatest lesson that he taught me is like how much a father needs to be present, because when your dad's not there, and like I said, we have a great relationship now. Everything's been forgiven. There's no like grudge in between us. Like he came over just the other night, we were hanging out, and like if I'm 28, but since I was like 20, 21, going to concerts and stuff like that, younger, I would ask my dad, hey, you want to go to a concert with me? Like I wouldn't go with a bunch of friends. I would take like my dad and my brother, and we would go to, Nashville concerts and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
it was like, So we have a great relationship now, but it was like him not being there. There's so many times where as you're growing up, it's confusing to try to find your way. And when your mom is at work, all the time because she's having to provide for, I grew up the oldest of 4 kids. And then when I turned 19, my mom had another kid with my stepdad. And so, but by that time, all of us were, I think the youngest of us first 4 was, I want to say like 13 or 14. So everybody was, older, a little bit older. But growing up and having to grow up a lot older, because it switched from a position of me to just being the oldest to almost a father to my younger brothers and sisters, and I had to grow up very quickly. So I think not knowing some of the answers, and I look at my brother and I see some of the things that he's done in his life, and I'm like, could I have done more to help him? You know what I'm saying? Like, is there more that I could have done? But at that point, and then I'm just like, dude, you were 14, 15 years old. Like, don't put that pressure on yourself. You know what I'm saying? But it's just like, it really highlighted to me how important the father's role is in the house. And like for my kids, because of the way that I grew up, no matter what happens with my wife, and me and my wife have an amazing relationship. I'm so very thankful for her. But even if it got to that point where me and her felt like we couldn't continue in our marriage, there's no way that we would, unless she just left me. And in my power, there's nothing that would get me to divorce my wife until all my kids are grown up, because, it's just, it's so very needed, and it's not highlighted enough, and you can't really express it enough, like how much a kid needs a father in their life, just to not only just to teach them the way that they need to grow, but just somebody that's there that they know that they can count on to go and talk to, or not even talk, just that can wrestle with, or go play basketball, or take you to the park, or whatever it is, just to have like somebody that that's like an anchor in your life, that I know I can depend on this dude.
Right. Yeah, that's it definitely feels like, I seen a meme the other day, and I think I might have even shared it, that like being married and having kids is, what was it? Like, it's countercultural now.
Yeah,
I forget
for
what
sure.
the meme says, but my mind went blank. But yeah, it was just like being a husband and a father to my wife, like, much like you said, we have a great relationship. I feel like we had a solid foundation from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously we're not perfect, and, can
do
things better, but it kind of weirdly kind of scratches my rebellion itch, being married, and kind of like, yeah, like not everybody's doing this, and it's not highly regarded. It's, it's like we said, countercultural. So it's like, all right, no,
it's an afterthought.
It adds fuel to the fire to, make it work, at least for me anyway.
Yeah, if you want to be a rebel right now, be a dad and a husband, and be faithful to your family, and you're going to be a rebel in today's society.
Right. And yeah. So, Call to Act podcast, what's your aim? Like, what are you working on? Where are you going?
Well, the Lord's revealed a lot to me just in the short time that I've done it. I can't believe it's almost been a year. But through it, I just thought, at first, I thought it was going to be kind of a platform just to kind of encourage men, and try to like inspire men to be better, fathers and men and things like that. But through that, I felt like the Lord was telling me, there's a verse in scripture where Jesus says, "He who has ears, let him hear." And so I felt like the Lord was telling me, like, what I want you to say is not just for like one specific group, like it's for everybody to hear. And I'm just a truck driver. I don't have, like I said before, any kind of schooling or anything like that, but I feel like we are all called to act. Like it's not just like a name of my podcast. Like, it is for every single one of us. There's a work for every single one of us to do. And so like I always say, like the point of my show, there's three things. It's to encourage people, it's to build people's faith, and it's to point to Jesus. And just throughout the whole, 11 months that I've had it, there's just been so many instances where things have happened and the only explanation behind it is Jesus. And so I tell anybody that's following me, like, we're just getting started, because I see that the doors that Jesus has opened for me. And my ultimate goal for this is I want this to be the number one Christian podcast in the world. So, it's when I first got started, my brother-in-law asked me, he said, is there anything like and I've not shared this on my podcast at all, but he said, is there anything like a Christian version of the Joe Rogan show? And I said, not to my knowledge. And he was like, well, why don't you try to do that? And so that's kind of the direction I'm trying to take it a little bit, because I don't want automatically, when you have something that you label as Christian, there's automatically a stigma to it. Right. And so like, if I can kind of bring in an aspect of like kind of intrigue and kind of make it a little bit interesting, where I'm not just beating you over the head with Bible verses, like that's what I try. I try to do that, try to make it interesting. I try to bring in people that like have interesting conversations where we're not just talking down at you for 45 minutes to an hour. But I think that's the ultimate goal behind it, is to try to be the Christian version of kind of what Joe Rogan's doing.
Well, that's awesome. That's a hell of a goal, and
for sure.
And anything we can do here to help you get there, we definitely will.
I appreciate it. I just look at it too, because if you look at the people, because it's just me saying that, people laugh. And because I've said that to people before and they kind of laugh, like, that's a lofty goal. And I'm like, I look at it like this. It's like, I was never, like I told you at the beginning, I was never somebody who made videos, or never somebody that made any kind of media for people to look at, any kind of content. And the Lord called me to do that. And if you look in scripture, the Lord called like fishermen, tax collectors, people that were considered like not worthy of being called by anybody, you know what I'm saying, to do any kind of ministry work. And so I look at my story and I feel like the only reason that the Lord has called me to do this is to show what he can do, like to actually truly show people his power. And because of where I feel like he's going to take it, the only explanation for where it's ultimately going to become is because of him. And so like right now, if you go to my Instagram, I only have like 800 followers. I only started this last year, but I feel like I don't know if it could take 10 years. I don't know if it'll take 20 years, but I just feel like there's too many things that have happened throughout the course of this year for it to go any other direction. And ultimately, when it gets to that point, like the only reason that it's happened is because Jesus said, I still use fishermen today. So anybody, when I say like we're called to act, there's no reason why anybody that's listening to this right now can't go out and do something. A lot of people are scared to try new things. They're intimidated. I don't want people to make fun of me. I don't want people to laugh at me. I don't want to look stupid. It's never going to be great right off the bat, but it's just attempting to do it. You're going to get better and better as it goes. And you never know where it's going to end up. We would never have this conversation right now, if I let my fear of trying, get the better of me. So it's just like, you never know where it's going to lead,
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely in alignment with you there, because in high school, my intramural basketball team, my nickname was Mute.
Yeah.
And like, I've always been known to be quiet. I don't say much. Yeah. And, I'm not going to say, I've been called by Jesus to do this, but it is definitely, I do it because it's scary. Like, I'm nervous before we hop on the call.
Yeah.
And I don't, it's not like I have to publish it, but like, I want to do this well. I want to meet guys like yourself and have good conversations and hopefully share stuff that helps somebody, not make the mistakes that I made. And
sure.
It's if I can't get over myself for that, then I'll never get over myself. So
yeah, I've heard it said before, like if we truly believe that we all are unique and there's only going to be one of us ever in the whole existence of this world, why would we hold the world back from what we can offer? You know what I'm saying? Like you might not be somebody, or I might not be somebody that reaches millions of people, but you never know if that one voice that's listening to you gets inspired by something that you say or encouraged by something that we say. And they're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to step out and try something. And then that person ends up reaching millions. And that wouldn't have happened had you not taken those steps and said, you know what? Yeah, this is scary, but I'm going to like step out of my comfort zone here and see what becomes of it. You know what I'm saying? You just never know who your voice is going to reach and what kind of impact that you're going to make. So it's just, yeah, it's scary, but I think that's something that's needed right now, is just to take that step outside your comfort zone.
Yeah. I mean, you said something that I said on a previous podcast, like made you think of something in a different way. It was like, it didn't alter the course of your life, but just the fact that a guy from Ohio can have the smallest impact on somebody in Tennessee.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything better.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I had a guy on, shout out to David Howitt. He was on my podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he said something that I thought was cool, because he said that when he first started putting out content, he was kind of that mindset of, I'm not doing anything groundbreaking here. Like everything that I'm saying has already been said, but you never know. Like if me and you both say something the same way, it might hit somebody differently the way you say it versus the way I say it. They could get nothing out of the way that I say it, but the way that you say it might resonate to them differently. And it might make them think, oh, wait, yeah, that does make sense. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's just, all of us don't hold the world back from what you have to offer, because we're all, given unique talents and abilities, that there's only going to be one of us here, and we only have one shot, to make whatever you can of your life. So like, get after it, make it happen,
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good statement to end it on. Donovan, I always leave this question for last, and just interested to get your definition. How would you define a Hall of Fame father?
Well, we kind of touched on a little bit, just I think being present, and then kind of making your kids feel like they're a priority in your life, because going back to that word countercultural. Like if you look in society and everything today, everybody's just talking about my truth. What makes me happy? What can I have? It's all about me, 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 me. Let me take a selfie, watch my video, watch my podcast, or watch whatever I just put out. And I think we can get so stuck up on ourselves that we can push other people to the side, obviously, because we only have so much space and time in our day to prioritize things. And so I think as a father, making your kids feel like they're a priority, and making your kids feel like they matter, you know what I'm saying? And just, I just don't want my kids to grow up and think of their dad as somebody who would put things on Instagram or put out stuff on YouTube, and then the dad that they knew was somebody completely different,
Yeah.
So I think just being present and trying to make them feel like they're loved, I think is, I think that's one of the most important things you can do as a father.
Beautiful. Well, Donovan, thanks for joining me, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. It's been a lot of fun.
Cheers.